Hi guys, so a shout out to all of my channel members, my VIPs. You guys are awesome. Thank you all so much for your support. So in terms of the structure of the video, I'm going to begin with talking about the murders and work from there, telling the case as it unfolded from the perspective of the police, before later on give my thoughts on why this massacre happened, which is a question that's still outstanding to this day and which may never be answered. And I'll combine this with my thoughts on the profile of the perpetrator. Also, there's new information being released every day about this case, so I'll try to incorporate as much of this as possible. Anyway, on with the video. On the evening of Saturday the 12th of November 2022, a post was made on social media showing a photo taken earlier that day of 6 friends, none of them over the age of 21, standing outside 1122 King Road in the city of Moscow in the US state of Idaho. Less than 24 hours after this photo was taken, 4 of those shown would be dead, butchered by a man who broke into the house in the early hours of the next morning, armed with a combat knife, in what initially appeared to be an act of random violence. But this wasn't the case. This was a targeted, premeditated act of depravity committed by a deranged and dangerous predator, a wolf in sheep's clothing. Welcome to Evil Among Us. Before the horrific events of Sunday the 13th November 2022, 1122 King Road was just another property in the city of Moscow, which is in Idaho, a state in the Pacific Northwest of the United States. This 6-bedroom, 3-bathroom house had, for a number of years, been used to house students studying at the University of Idaho, and it was here that 4 of them would lose their lives in truly horrific circumstances. This tiny part of American suburbia would be thrust into the news, with the nation still, to this day, asking why. The victims included best friends Kaylee Goncalves and Maddie Mogen, known as Maddie. Both were just 21 years old when they died. Kaylee was born in California and Maddie was born in Oregon, but both moved to Idaho when they were children, and they've been inseparable since they met at Winton Elementary School in Coeur d'Alene. The pair were seniors at the University of Idaho, on the cusp of graduating and starting their new lives, but they would never get the chance. Both women had lived together in the property on King Road, but not long before the massacre, Kaylee had moved out, as she was getting ready to go on a backpacking trip across Europe. She'd only returned to say goodbye to her friends. Xana Kernodle was just 20 years old, and she also lost her life. She was a native of Idaho, having been born in Coeur d'Alene before moving to Post Falls. Xana was a junior at the University of Idaho, majoring in marketing. As well as living together, she and Maddie Mogen worked together at the Mad Greek restaurant. Lastly, there was 20-year-old Idaho University freshman Ethan Chapin. He was one of triplets and was majoring in sports tourism management. He didn't actually live at the house, but was in a relationship with Xana Kernodle and would often stay over. Tragically, he was present when a madman would break in and wreak absolute havoc, robbing 4 innocent people of their futures and traumatising 2 others, who, whilst present in the house, survived. These were Dylan Mortenson and Bethany Funk, both 21. Whilst they both survived, the psychological scars they now have to live with cannot be underestimated. This slightly includes guilt that they had no idea what was happening to their friends and were unable to save them. The 6 friends were close, but they spent the day of Saturday the 12th November 2022 together, and at 8:57 PM, Kaylee posted a picture of them on social media, which had been taken just hours before. This photo is haunting, as less than 24 hours after it was taken, 4 of those pictured would be dead. There's further footage taken close to the time of the murders themselves, which show young people with their whole future ahead of them, living their lives, enjoying themselves, unaware that this would be their last day on Earth. I always find this chilling and have this urge, however ridiculous, to shout at the screen, telling them to run, to get away. So at around 10 PM, Kaylee and Maddie left home and were seen at the corner club bar. They spent several hours here and were seen on CCTV drinking and hanging out with other students. At around the same time, Ethan and Xana went to a party at the Sigma Chi fraternity house that was about a 5 minutes walk away from the shared home. At 1:33 a.m. on Sunday the 13th November 2022, Kaylee and Maddie were captured leaving the Corner Club bar and walking down the street with a friend of theirs. At 1:41 a.m, they were seen getting food from the Grub Truck, a food truck located on South Main Street. The owner was live streaming on Twitch, which filmed both Kaylee and Maddie ordering from the truck. This was around 2.5 hours before these friends would be murdered.
Hello.
Hi.
Welcome back.
Thanks. I think I would like the carbonara.
Okay.
But if I have a free grub truck on my app.
Oh, yep. So what you want to do is we'll actually do this.
The pair then got a taxi together, arriving back at 1122 King Road at around 2 a.m. By this point, Ethan and Xana had been home for around 15 minutes, having come back from the frat party. Dylan Mortenson and Bethany Funk were already in the house, so now all 6 people relevant to this case were in the property. It's important to explain the layout of the house, including where everyone was. Floors are labelled differently in the UK and the US. We have a ground floor over here, but I'll describe it as it would be in America. So for those from the UK, if you're visualising this, take 1 away from the floor number. The area around the property is also really important, but I'll return to that later. So starting from the top, so if you're facing the front of the house, on the 3rd floor were the bedrooms of Maddie on the left and Kaylee on the right. However, after they got home, both went into Maddie's room, and at 2:26 a.m, they made 10 calls to Kaylee's ex-boyfriend, none of which were answered. They then fell asleep together in Maddie's bed. Murphy, Kaylee's dog, settled down in her room. On the 2nd floor, just to the left of the stairs, was the room of the first survivor, Dylan Mortenson. Across the hall on the right of the house was Xana Kernodle's room, where she was staying with her boyfriend Ethan Chapin. Also on this floor were a set of sliding doors leading to the outside of the house. On the bottom floor, just to the left of the main front door, was the bedroom of Bethany Funk, the other survivor. Little did any of them know that an extremely dangerous man was on his way to the property, with murder in mind. The camera on the house next to the murder scene captured a white Hyundai Elantra repeatedly circling the area around the house in King Road, again and again, for approximately 25 minutes, between 3:33 a.m. and 3:56 a.m. At 4:01 a.m, Xana Kernodle went outside and grabbed a DoorDash order. The DoorDasher later reported that he didn't see anyone suspicious in the area when he made his delivery. 4 minutes later, the same Hyundai, which had been circling, was captured again, passing the house, before parking up. The driver then got out. He was dressed all in black, wearing a balaclava and armed with a K-bar knife. The K-bar was designed for use by the US military during the Second World War, and is considered one of the best fighting knives ever produced. With a blade length of 7 inches, it's a weapon specifically designed to kill. At approximately 4:07 a.m, the man let himself in via the unlocked sliding doors, emerging on the 2nd floor. So it seems that the killer went straight up to the 3rd floor and entered Maddie's room, where she and Kaylee were asleep. They were then subjected to a savage and frenzied attack. It seems that Maddie was attacked first, being stabbed over 20 times while she slept. Kaylee then woke up, and there was evidence of a struggle, with her receiving defensive injuries to her hands. However, she was soon overpowered and stabbed over 30 times, with her killer then hacking at her face, completely disfiguring her. There was also evidence that she'd been beaten with a blunt object and strangled. Kaylee's face was so badly disfigured that one of the surviving housemates later misidentified her body. Hearing a noise upstairs, Dylan Mortenson, on the floor below, woke up and briefly opened her bedroom door. She heard someone say, quote, "There's someone here," before closing the door again. The person who said this was likely Xana Kernodle, who was sat eating her food delivery, and it's known she was watching TikTok at 4:12 a.m. Her boyfriend, Ethan Chapin, given the position his body was found in, was likely asleep in bed. Dylan said she heard movement between the second and third floors, and it's believed this was likely Xana leaving her room and going upstairs to investigate the noise she heard. At some point, either on the stairs or on the landing, she came face to face with the killer. He likely chased her a short distance, and there was a violent struggle, which potentially began in the hall and ended up inside her bedroom. Xana had significant defensive injuries, showing her desperate fight for her life, and this included 2 of her fingers almost being sliced off. She suffered a truly horrific death. Xana was stabbed at least 50 times, with her lungs and heart being punctured. She slumped to the floor of her bedroom and bled to death in minutes. The killer then plunged the knife into Ethan's neck and chest, killing him. This attack occurred at around 4:16 a.m, approximately 9 minutes after the masked intruder had entered the house, as the sounds of voices, a whimper, and a loud thud were captured on a Ring doorbell camera at the neighbouring property. During this time, Dylan reported that she opened the door slightly and heard noises coming from Xana's room, and a male voice, which she believed said, quote, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." She closed the door again, only to open it for a third time moments later at 4:18 a.m. To Dylan's horror, she saw a man dressed all in black, wearing a mask which covered everything apart from his eyes, walking towards her from Xana's room. She later described him as a white male, around 5'10", with bushy eyebrows. He was carrying something, which is now believed was the knife wrapped in a cloth. He walked past Dylan's room and out of the house. It's believed the killer didn't see her due to a bright neon good vibes sign that was near her bedroom, obscuring his vision. Dylan then closed the door and locked it. The man then left the property, got back in his car, and at 4:20 a.m, it was captured speeding away from the area. The attack had lasted less than 20 minutes, and during this time, 4 people had been murdered. Dylan then called Bethany Funk, waking her up. The pair began exchanging text messages between 4:22 and 4:24 a.m. Dylan said that she thought that someone was in the house, and Bethany eventually told her, quote, "Come to my room," and run. Dylan also texted Kaylee, unaware that her friend was already dead by this point. Dylan then left her room and, as instructed, ran downstairs towards Bethany's room. She saw Xana lying on the floor of her bedroom with her head towards the wall and her feet towards the door. Dylan thought Xana was simply drunk. Dylan and Bethany then locked the door, and over the next 8 hours, Dylan's mobile data shows that she sent several texts to her roommates as well as trying to call them. She also used the Snap Map function on Snapchat to try and locate the phones of Xana Kernodle and Ethan Chapin. People have questioned why Dylan and Bethany didn't call the police straight away, and this is a fair question, but the answer is not clear. I think it was a combination of issues. Firstly, alcohol. It appears everyone in the house had been drinking. This likely impaired their perception of what was going on. The text that Dylan sent seemed to indicate a certain level of confusion, with it being implied at one point that she thought the person she saw dressed all in black was Xana. However, there's also the fact that at the time, the pair had no idea of the extent of what had happened, and this is understandable. We always imagine these types of things happening to someone else. We know now what occurred at 1122 King Road, and it still feels unbelievable. A man broke in and butchered 4 people, apparently for no reason. I'm sure Dylan and Bethany ran through scenarios in their head, but they would never, in their worst nightmares, have imagined their friends had all been murdered. Lastly, they were clearly terrified. They knew something was going on, but were too scared to leave their room to find out. At 11:50 a.m, so around 7 hours after the murders, Dylan Mortenson called a friend, Emily Alant, and asked her to come over and check the house because she was scared. Emily and her boyfriend Hunter came over, and at this point, all 4 of them started looking around the house. They saw Xana still lying on the floor, in the same position where she'd been seen hours before. Hunter stayed behind whilst the others went outside, and they were then joined by a female neighbour who saw something was wrong. Hunter then came out and his face was ashen white. He checked on Xana and found that she wasn't breathing. It was at this point that the first 911 call was made by Dylan. It's clear in this case that there's panic, but also real confusion as to what has happened.
911 location of your emergency.
Something is happening. Something happened in our house. We don't know what.
What is the address of the emergency?
1122.
What is the rest of the address?
Oh, Kings Road.
Okay. And is that a house or an apartment?
It's a house.
Can you repeat the address to make sure that I have it right?
I'll talk to you guys. We live at the White, so we're next to them.
I need someone to repeat the address for verification.
The address, 1122 King Road.
And what's the phone number that you're calling from?
What's your phone number?
And tell me exactly what's going on.
One of the roommates has passed out, and she was drunk last night, and she's not waking up.
Okay.
Oh, and they saw some man in their house last night. Yeah. Hi, this is.
And are you with the patient? Okay, I need someone to keep the phone, stop passing it around.
Can I just tell you what happened pretty much?
What is going on currently? Is someone passed out right now?
I don't really know, but pretty much at 4 a.m.
Okay, I need to know what's going on right now if someone is passed out. Can you find that out?
Yeah, I'll come. Come on, but we gotta go check. But we have to. Is she passed out? She's not waking up.
Okay, one moment. I'm getting help started that way.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and how old is she?
She's 20.
20, you said?
Yes, 20 here.
Okay.
Hello? Hello?
Okay, I need someone to stop passing the phone around because I've talked to 4 different people.
Okay, sorry, they just gave me the phone.
Is she breathing?
Hello?
Is she breathing?
No.
Okay.
You talk to them, okay? I can't talk to them. I need you to talk to them.
Okay. Hello.
Okay. I've already sent the ambulance and law enforcement. Stay on the line. If there is a defibrillator available, send someone to get it now and tell me when you have it.
Say that again. There's a police here right now.
Okay. If there's a defibrillator available, send someone to get it now and tell me when you have it.
We don't have one. I think yes. Do you have a defibrillator? Yes, you have one.
Are you talking to the officer?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to let you go since he's there with you and can help you.
The police had no idea of the horror they were about to walk into. Officers entered the house, expecting to find a woman, potentially dead or in cardiac arrest. But as they moved through the property, they realised this was something far, far worse. An officer entered the bedroom where Xana Kernodle and Ethan Chapin had been sleeping. He later testified, quote, "When I arrived, I entered the residence and went to the second floor. I observed a female wearing a sweatshirt and underwear laying in the middle of the bedroom floor, covered in blood. I observed deep lacerations, indicative of defensive wounds on the female's hands. The female was surrounded by blood on the floor. I observed a male laying on the bed. The male appeared to have suffered from stab wounds and a laceration to the neck. The male was covered in blood, and the bedding around him was soaked in blood. The testimony continued. I observed blood covering portions of Ethan's legs, surrounding his body into the bed sheets, and drops of blood on the wall near Ethan's head. Next, they moved to the 3rd floor and entered Maddie Mogen's room, where Kaylee Goncalves had also settled for the night. An officer later reported, quote, "In a 3rd floor bedroom, I observed 2 females laying in bed who appeared to have been stabbed to death. The female laying on the left half of the bed, as I looked at it from the doorway, was unrecognisable. Her face was completely disfigured and was stabbed several times. I was unable to comprehend exactly what I was looking at or was trying to discern the nature of the injuries. The second female, on the right half of the bed, had multiple stab wounds. The comforter was soaked in blood, and a pool of blood was still present. It was clear that all 4 people in the 2 bedrooms were beyond saving, and 21-year-old Kaylee Goncalves, 21-year-old Maddie Mogen, 20-year-old Xana Kernodle, and 20-year-old Ethan Chapin were all pronounced dead at the scene. The savagery of the attack was clear almost immediately. Each victim had been stabbed in a frenzy. The area was soon swarming with police officers, and a quadruple murder investigation began. Nearly 130 law enforcement personnel from 3 different agencies worked on this case, including those from the Moscow Police Department, the Idaho State Police, and the FBI, and they had a mountain to climb. They quickly identified that this was not a burglary gone wrong. This was a targeted attack, but inquiries didn't reveal any obvious motives. None of the 6 people in the house at the time were known to have any enemies, and none have reported feeling in fear for their life. There was one piece of key forensic evidence, a knife sheath, which had apparently been accidentally left behind in the room where Kaylee Goncalves and Maddie Mogen had been murdered. The knife itself was not recovered, but the police were confident that the sheath, at one point, had contained the murder weapon and had been taken to the scene by the killer. This key piece of evidence was taken away and a DNA profile was recovered, but this didn't match anyone on any database. The killer had never been in the system before. The police obtained statements which appeared to confirm their theory that this was a targeted incident, as they were made aware of strange goings-on around the house in the weeks and months before the murders, indicating that someone was likely watching the property and potentially even stalking the occupants. Specifically, in September 2022, 2 months before the murders, it was reported that Kaylee had told a friend that she had a stalker and had received a strange message on Facebook Messenger. In addition, Bethany Funk, one of the 2 roommates who survived, told detectives that in October, Kaylee had taken her dog Murphy outside when she saw an unknown man standing above their house on a road which overlooked the property. He seemed to be staring at her. Kaylee was so unnerved by this, she called her roommates and asked if they could come home because she was scared. Later this same month, at a Halloween party, the victims were on their patio and Murphy, Kaylee's dog, ran off and didn't come back straight away, which was very unusual. The group became concerned that there was someone in the woods watching them, and they heard what they thought were footsteps. They didn't see anyone, but the dog's behaviour caused them to go back inside and lock the door. Lastly, on the 4th of November, 9 days before the attack, the roommates came home at around 11 AM to find the door open, loose on its hinges, as if someone had tried to break in. The door was repaired, and none of the occupants seemed to think much more about it. Was the killer responsible for each of these incidents? I think almost definitely yes. It's clear this attack was targeted. One or more of the people in 1122 King Road had been marked for death for some reason. This man inevitably watched his prey. He also knew the layout of the property, and had gained this knowledge likely through a combination of breaking in and watching from a distance. The police made an appeal for anyone to provide evidence which could help them solve this case, including providing any CCTV of the area. This led to the first break. They saw a white Hyundai Elantra circling the area in the moments before the attack began. However, it appeared the license plate had been removed from the vehicle, and so detectives began pulling records of the owners of the same make, model and colour of car in the local area. Around 2 weeks after the murder, the police came across a picture that piqued their interest. This was of a man named Bryan Kohberger, a 28-year-old PhD student in criminal justice and criminology at Washington State University. Kohberger's height matched the description given by Dylan Mortenson of the man she saw in her home during the attack, and he also had bushy eyebrows, which matched what she'd seen. Kohberger was a name amongst many others, and detectives looked into him, but they couldn't find any link between him and any of the students living at King Road. He was older than all of them, and didn't even study at the same university. He also lived in the city of Pullman in Washington State, around 8 miles away, so there was no link between him and any of the victims. So this made his movements around the time of the murders really strange and piqued detectives' interest. Bryan Kohberger's phone was tracked heading to Moscow before the attack, and then his phone appeared to be deliberately switched off between 2:47 and 4:48 AM, which was consistent with someone trying to conceal their location. When the phone was switched back on, it pinged off a tower south of Moscow near Bryan, Idaho, travelling back towards Pullman. More chillingly was the fact that Kohberger's phone data showed that he'd been near 1122 King Road 12 times between June 2022 and the date of the murders in November of that year. Things became even more suspicious when it transpired that Kohberger got a new license plate 5 days after the murders, appearing to try and make it difficult to link his vehicle to the one seen in the area. Police were also able to establish that he'd bought a balaclava from Dick's Sporting Goods store in Pittsburgh in January 2022, 11 months before the murders, and 8 months before the killings, in March 2022, he'd bought a K-bar knife off Amazon. The DNA they'd taken from the crime scene was fed into a genealogy website and showed a partial match to relatives of Kohberger. This was apparently either a second or third cousin. By the beginning of December 2022, the net was closing in on Bryan Kohberger, and he was placed under FBI surveillance. But then he left the area. Kohberger's father, Michael, came to visit him in Pullman, and on Monday the 12th of December 2022, they began the 2,500-mile journey to the family home in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. On Thursday the 15th of December, the car was pulled over twice in quick succession for traffic violations whilst travelling through Indiana. There was reporting at one point that these stops were initiated by the FBI so that video could be taken to see if Bryan Kohberger had wounds to his hands, but this appears to have been false. These were just 2 random traffic stops. If Kohberger was nervous, he didn't show it. Surveillance continued when Kohberger reached his destination, and his behaviour became more suspicious. He was seen thoroughly cleaning the interior and exterior of his car and wearing forensic gloves outside the family home. Kohberger was also seen dumping rubbish in the neighbour's bin. At 4 AM on Tuesday the 27th of December 2022, officers went through the bins outside the Kohberger residence and sent this to a lab in Idaho for DNA testing. It's been reported that DNA from Bryan Kohberger was taken from a discarded Q-tip and compared to the DNA found on the leather knife sheath found at the murder scene, and they matched. The police had their man, and at 3 AM on Friday the 30th of December 2022, 6 weeks after the massacre, an FBI SWAT team stormed the house and arrested Bryan Kohberger on suspicion of 4 counts of murder. During his first police interview, it was noted that Kohberger was completely calm and he began chatting to detectives. He spoke freely about his academic studies, but when the topic switched to the murders, he lawyered up and the interview ended. The evidence against Bryan Kohberger continued to build. Detectives were able to obtain a more detailed understanding of his movements before and after the murders. They were able to see, using mobile phone records, that he left his home at 1630 Northeast Valley Road in Pullman at around 2:42 AM, travelling in the direction of the city of Moscow. He then returned home around 5:30 AM. They had also discovered a disturbing detail. At approximately 9 AM on Sunday the 13th November 2022, so around 4 hours after the murders, Bryan Kohberger drove back to the area around 1122 King Road. At this point, the 4 victims were lying slain in the house, and the 2 survivors were cowering in fear in one bedroom, trying to work out what had happened. After staying briefly, he then returned to his apartment in Pullman. He had clearly returned to admire his handiwork. He was no doubt expecting the area to be swarmed by police. He could watch the chaos he created unfold. He was no doubt disappointed by what he saw and drove home. Kohberger then took a selfie, with him giving a thumbs up to the camera, a smirk on his face, proud of what he'd done. The next day, he went to work as a teaching assistant at the University of Washington and acted like nothing had happened. He was subsequently charged with 4 counts of murder and 1 count of burglary and kept in jail. The police knew they were dealing with a monster, but who exactly is Bryan Kohberger? Bryan Christopher Kohberger was born on Monday the 21st November 1994, the son of Mary Ann and Michael Kohberger. He was raised along with his 2 sisters, Melissa and Amanda, in Albrightsville, a town in the state of Pennsylvania. Kohberger was an overweight child, and unfortunately this led to extensive bullying by his classmates, firstly at Pleasant Valley Intermediate and then Pocono Mountain East High School in Pennsylvania, which would have had a massive impact on his self-esteem. He was isolated and had few friends during his schooling. Things got worse for him when in September 2009, aged 14, he was diagnosed as suffering from a condition known as visual snow. This is a rare neurological condition where individuals experience persistent visual disturbance resembling static or snow across their entire field of vision, even when their eyes are closed. I'd never heard of this before, and I can, at this point, sympathise with Bryan Kohberger, as this sounds like a terrible condition. Kohberger took to an online forum called Tapper Talk, where he commiserated with other individuals with various conditions. It was here that he spoke about his inner thoughts. It's from these we get an insight into the disturbed individual that Kohberger was becoming. In January 2011, aged 16, Kohberger posted, quote, "I've had visual snow since September the 21st of 2009. Since then, I have changed, mainly from the anxiety and sense of derealization and hopelessness." However, his post became dark quickly. In May of this same year, he wrote, quote, "I always feel as if I'm not there, completely depersonalized." He then listed a number of traits he believed he exhibited, and this included feeling like my life is a movie, depression, crazy thoughts, poor self-image, poor social skills, delusions of grandeur, and in capitals, no emotion. He ended this post with, quote, "When I get home, I'm mean to my family. This started when visual snow did. I felt no emotion, and along with the depersonalization, I can say and do whatever I want, with little remorse." Whilst Bryan Kohberger never came to the attention of the police before the murders, it appears from this post that he was likely showing problematic behaviour behind closed doors. What form this took is unclear, but the important thing is that Kohberger clearly felt no remorse or empathy for his actions. Around this time, he began using heroin as a way to cope with his situation. Kohberger's poor communication skills may also have been down to him suffering from autism spectrum disorder, which is something his defence later said he had. However, this has nothing to do with his subsequent crimes, so I'll not mention it again. Bryan Kohberger eventually left the forum in 2012, claiming that he'd come to terms with this diagnosis and was now hopeful for the future. This was all over a decade before the murders. It could just be put down to the overly dramatic postings of a teenager. But considering what he went on to do, I think they're important. You have a child who was bullied and diagnosed with a pretty horrific neurological condition, and I think as a way to cope, Kohberger detached himself from society. He shut down emotionally. He felt nothing for anyone, likely because he felt no one felt anything for him. People didn't like him, so he didn't like people. He was powerless, but he desperately wanted to be powerful, and he had delusions of grandeur, a belief that he was in fact better than other people. When he was around 17 years old, Bryan Kohberger lost over 100 pounds through a combination of obsessive dieting, punishing workouts and kickboxing training. This appeared to turn his psyche on its head. A person who knew him after this point later said, quote, "It was like he decided that since he'd been the victim, now it was his turn to make others feel small." Kohberger didn't find peace within himself. He was determined to gain power, which he felt he was deprived of when he was younger. Things seemed to take an upturn in Kohberger's life when in 2018, aged 24, he obtained a place at DeSalle University in eastern Pennsylvania and was awarded an undergraduate degree in psychology in 2020. He then obtained a master's degree in 2022. It was during this time that Kohberger stated that he wanted a job capturing violent criminals, but that such a position would be difficult to get, so he was thinking about counselling high-profile offenders. But this wasn't about helping these people to address their issues or gaining an understanding to help society. This appears to be firmly rooted in Kohberger's admiration for those who he saw with real power, those who have victimised and abused others, the people who he wanted to emulate. Bryan Kohberger was not popular with the other students. In fact, he made them feel uncomfortable and was considered the black sheep of his class. A student who knew him later said that he seemed interested in the thought process of criminals whilst they committed their crimes, and less interested in why they did it in the first place. In addition, his time in class demonstrated another relevant factor in our understanding of Kohberger: his disdain for women. It's been reported that Kohberger would often take a contrary viewpoint just to cause an argument. He would particularly do this with women. On one occasion, he apparently spoke down to a fellow student, mansplaining a concept, and his tone was so demeaning that she stormed out of the room. His dismissive behaviour towards women continued when he moved from Pennsylvania to the city of Pullman, Washington in June 2022, just 5 months before the murders, to study for a PhD in criminal justice and criminology at Washington State University, less than 10 miles from the University of Idaho, where his victims studied. During this time, he lived in a property at 1630 Northeast Valley Road. Whilst at the University of Washington, Kohberger obtained a position as a teaching assistant, but he was very unpopular. In September 2022, just weeks into the job, Kohberger was pulled up for his behaviour, including his disrespectful attitude towards a female professor. He also graded male students differently to female students. Eventually, Kohberger was fired in December 2022, a few weeks after the murders, with his sexist attitude and rude behaviour towards women being the main reason. Behind the scenes, it's been reported that Bryan Kohberger was becoming fixated with serial killers, including Ted Bundy. He was also searching for pornography depicting the rape of women, using keywords including forced, passed out, drugged and sleeping. So this is who Bryan Kohberger is: a misogynist who wanted to dominate women, someone with delusions of grandeur, a man who appears to have had no empathy or remorse for his actions, someone fixated with criminals, likely drawn to the power they have over other people, exactly what he wanted to achieve, exactly what he felt entitled to. This is who the police were dealing with. This doesn't fully explain why he committed these murders, but I'll return to my feelings on this towards the end of the video. But in the short term, we'll move to the long, protracted legal proceedings where the evil of Bryan Kohberger would be laid bare and he would learn his fate. On Tuesday the 3rd of January 2023, Bryan Kohberger appeared in court in Pennsylvania and formally waived his right to challenge his extradition back to Idaho, with his defence releasing a statement which read, quote, "Mr. Kohberger is eager to be exonerated of these charges and looks forward to resolving these matters as promptly as possible." The next day, he was flown across the country and booked into the later county jail. On Thursday the 5th of January 2023, Kohberger appeared in court and was ordered held without bond. On Monday the 22nd of May 2023, he stood silent when asked to enter his pleas, and so the judge entered not guilty pleas on his behalf to 4 counts of murder and 1 count of burglary. The trial was set to begin in October 2023. However, this kept being pushed back, as behind the scenes, both the prosecution and defence were compiling their arguments. The prosecution's case rests on the DNA evidence, mobile phone location tracking, his Amazon purchase history, and CCTV evidence, and their case was strong. Bryan Kohberger, who apparently had no connection to anyone who lived at 1122 King Road in Moscow, had apparently been in the area around the house at least 12 times in the 5 months before the murders. He also drove an identical type of vehicle seen in the area just before the attacks, and his phone data showed him travelling towards the site of the house just before the crimes and travelling back home after the killings had occurred. Whilst a murder weapon was never recovered, his DNA was found at the scene on a leather sheath he was known to have purchased, along with a K-bar knife believed to have been the murder weapon. Whilst I understand the defence's job is to do the best for their clients, and this is part of the justice system, their tactics often annoy me, as it's clear that much of their role is not to defend the innocent, but to help the guilty escape justice, and this is true in this case. The defence filed a raft of motions trying to suppress every part of the prosecution's case. This included the DNA evidence, his Amazon purchase history, his Google search history, items found searching his house, his person, his apartment, his family home. They cited procedural errors, violation of Kohberger's right to privacy, and of the US Constitution. Thankfully, all of these motions were thrown out. The prosecution informed the defence that they would be seeking the death penalty if Bryan Kohberger was convicted, and this led to them making an argument that such a sentence would be unconstitutional due to him having autism spectrum disorder. The judge declined to rule out the death penalty as a possible punishment in this case. Whilst this was all going on Thursday the 28th of December 2023, over a year after the murders, 1122 King Road was demolished. This was to stop it from becoming some sort of morbid tourist attraction. It was reported that a 3D model of the property would be used at the trial to assist the jury to understand the layouts of the house and the movements of the killer. The legal process rolled on, and the trial of Bryan Kohberger was scheduled to begin in August 2025. However, this was cancelled when on Monday the 30th of June 2025, much to everyone's surprise, after reaching a plea deal which took the death penalty off the table, Kohberger appeared in court in front of Judge Stephen Hippler and pleaded guilty to all charges.
And then let me ask you, did you, on November 13th, 2022, enter the residence at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho, with the intent to commit the felony crime of murder?
Yes.
Did you, on November 13th, 2022, in Latah County, state of Idaho, kill and murder Maddie Mogen, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, and with premeditation and malice of forethought?
Yes.
Did you, on or about that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Kaylee Goncalves, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, and with premeditation and malice of forethought?
Yes.
And did you, on that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Xana Kernodle, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice of forethought?
Yes.
And then on or about November 13th, 2022, again in Latah County, Idaho, did you kill and murder Ethan Chapin, a human being?
Yes.
Did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice of forethought?
Yes.
On Wednesday the 23rd of July 2025, Bryan Kohberger was back in court to learn his fate. I'm going to play the part of the proceedings where the sentence was imposed. Before this, I'm going to include clips of a couple of victim impact statements being read out. I think they're important to hear to remind us that regardless of the sentence, this wouldn't bring back the 4 victims in this case. Their loss is something their families will likely never get over. So much pain as a result of the actions of one selfish man.
Thank you, Your Honor. What happened that night changed everything. Because of him, 4 beautiful, genuine, compassionate people were taken from this world for no reason. He didn't just take their lives. He took the light they carried it into every room. He took away how they made everyone feel safe, loved, and full of joy. He took away the ability for me to tell them that I love them and that I'm so proud of them. He took away who they were becoming and the futures they were going to have. He took away birthdays, graduations, celebrations, and all the memories that we were supposed to make. All of it is gone. And all the people who loved them are just left to carry that weight forever. He didn't just take them from the world, he took them from me, my friends, my people who felt like my home, the people I looked up to and adored more than anyone. He took away my ability to trust the world around me. What he did shattered me in places I didn't know could break. I was barely 19 when he did this. We had just celebrated my birthday at the end of September. I should have been figuring out who I was. I should have been having the college experience and starting to establish my future. Instead, I was forced to learn how to survive the unimaginable. I couldn't be alone. I had to sleep in my mom's bed because I was too terrified to close my eyes. Terrified that if I blinked, someone might be there. I made escape plans everywhere I went. If something happens, how do I get out? What can I use to defend myself? Who can help? And then there are the panic attacks. The kind that slam into me like a tsunami out of nowhere. I can't breathe. I can't think. I can't stop shaking. All I can do is scream because the emotional pain and the grief is too much to handle. My chest feels like it's caving in. Sometimes I drop to the floor with my heart racing, convinced something is very wrong. It's far beyond anxiety. It's my body reliving everything over and over again. My nervous system never got the message that it is over, and it won't let me forget what he did to them. People call me strong. They say I'm a survivor, but they don't see what my new reality looks like. They don't see the panic attacks, the hypervigilance, the exhaustion, the way I scan every room I enter, the way I flinch at sudden sounds. They don't know how heavy it is to carry so much pain and still be expected to keep going, and that's because of him. He stole parts of me I may never get back. He took the version of me who didn't constantly ask, what if it happens again? What if next time I don't survive? He may have shattered parts of me, but I'm still putting myself back together. Piece by piece, I'm learning how to live in this new version of life. It is not easy. It hurts, but I'm still trying. Still trying, and I'm not trying just for me. I'm trying for them, my friends. About a year ago, I had a dream about them. I got to say goodbye. I told them I won't be able to see you again, so I need to tell you goodbye. They all kept asking why, and all I could say was, I can't tell you, but I have to. When I woke up, I felt shattered and heartbroken, but also strangely grateful. Like maybe in some way that dream gave us the goodbye we never got. Still, no dream can replace them, and no goodbye will ever feel finished. He is a hollow vessel, something less than human. A body without empathy, without remorse. He chose destruction. He chose evil. He feels nothing. He tried to take everything from me. My friends, my safety, my identity, my future. He took their lives, but I will continue trying to be like them to make them proud. Living is how I honor them. Speaking today is to help me find some sort of justice for them. And I will never let him take that from me. He may have taken so much from me, but he will never get to take my voice. He will never take the memories I had with them. He will never erase the love we shared, the laughs we had, or the way they made me feel seen and whole. Those things are mine. They are sacred, and he will never touch them. I get to feel sadness. I get to feel rage. I get to feel joy even when it's hard. I get to feel love even when it hurts. I get to live. And while I will still live with this pain, at least I get to live my life. He will stay here, empty, forgotten, and powerless.
Dylan, thank you so much for your courage. I appreciate it.
Hello, I'd like to start by thanking the court for allowing me the time and opportunity to speak today. My name is Olivia, and I'm the big sister of Kaylee Goncalves, and I was blessed to love Maddie Mogen as a sister too. I'm not here today to speak in grief, I'm here to speak in truth. Because the truth is, my sister Kaylee and her best friend Maddie were not yours to take. They were not yours to study, to stalk, or to silence. They were two pieces of a whole, the perfect yin and yang. They are everything that you could never be. Loved, accepted, vibrant, accomplished, brave, and powerful. Because the truth about Kaylee and Maddie is they would have been kind to you. If you had approached them in their everyday lives, they would have given you directions, thanked you for the compliment, or awkwardly giggled to make your own words less uncomfortable for you. In a world that rejected you, they would have shown mercy. Because the truth is, I'm angry. Every day I'm angry. I'm left shouting at the inside of my own head everything I wish I could say to you. The truth about me is when I heard the news, I didn't cry. I listened for them. I promised them I would, that I would fight for them, that I would show up no matter what it cost me. I swore I'd never let them feel alone. Because you see, I've always been their heavyweight. I've always been the one to fight the battles they didn't feel ready to fight themselves. All it ever took was a call, and they knew I would handle it for them, no matter the time, no matter the cost. They could wave their white flag because they knew I would never back down, not for them, and not even death could change that. Somewhere along the line, I started to think about what I would say to them if I was given just one last chance. If I could gather enough heartbreak or love or sacrifice or whatever it took to get just one message across, what would I say? Throughout this entire process, I've written my feelings down at every moment, my wishes, my love, my denial, my anger. And as one final act of love, I'd planned to read these thoughts, even jarring and discombobulating and not even making sense. Because for me, that was true love. As bare and as naked as it could be, not laced in pretty words or dressed for the occasion, but written through bleary eyes at 2 a.m. with clenched fists, angry at this reality. My true final act of love was to continue on without them, for them. That dream to read aloud my love to them, to bring meaning through pain, was the latest blow in realizing you don't deserve it. And Kaylee and Maddie don't need it. Kaylee and Maddie have always known my love, and they would never ask me to prove it by further victimizing myself to a defendant who has shown no guilt, no remorse, no apprehension. They would say to me, "Why would you give the satisfaction of showing vulnerability now? You promised you would never back down." And for that clarity, I'm thankful. I won't stand here and give you what you want. I won't offer you tears. I won't offer you trembling. Disappointments like you thrive on pain, on fear, and on the illusion of power. And I won't feed your beast. Instead, I will call you what you are: sociopath, psychopath, murderer. I will ask the questions that reverberate violently in my own head, so loudly that I can't think straight most any day. Some of these might be familiar, so sit up straight when I talk to you. How was your life right before you murdered my sisters? Did you prepare for the crime before leaving your apartment? Please detail what you were thinking and feeling at this time. Why did you choose my sisters? Before making your move, did you approach my sisters? Detail what you were thinking and feeling. Before leaving their home, is there anything else you did? How does it feel to know the only thing you failed more miserably at than being a murderer is trying to be a rapper? Did you recently start shaving or manually pulling out your eyebrows? Why November 13th? Did you truly think your Amazon purchase was untraceable because you used a gift card? How do you find it enjoyable to stargaze with such a severe case of visual snow? Where is the murder weapon, the clothes you wore that night? What did you bring into the house with you? What was the second weapon you used on Kaylee? What were Kaylee's last words? Please describe in detail the level of anxiety you must have felt when you heard the Bearcat pull up to your family home on December 30th, 2022. Which do you regret more? Returning to the crime scene 5 hours later, or never, ever going back to Moscow, not even once, after stalking them there for months? If you were really smart, do you think you'd be here right now? What's it like needing this much attention just to feel real? You're terrified of being ordinary, aren't you? Do you feel anything at all? Or are you exactly what you always feared? Nothing. If you're so powerful, then why are you still hiding, defendant? You see, I'm here today as me. But who are you? Let's try to take off your mask and see. You didn't create devastation. You revealed it in yourself. And that darkness you carry, that emptiness, you'll sit with it long after this is over. That is your sentence. And it was written on the wall long before you ever pled guilty. You didn't win. You just exposed yourself as the coward you are. You're a delusional, pathetic, hypochondriac loser who thought you were so much smarter than everybody else. Constantly scolding, turning your nose up to grammar mistakes, nitpicking and criticizing others. You wanted so badly to be different, to be special, to be better, to be deep, to be mysterious. You found yourself thinking you were better than everyone else, and you thought you could figure out the human psyche and see through it, all while tweaked out on heroin. Lurking in the shadows made you feel powerful because no one ever paid you any attention in the light. You thought you were exceptional, all because of a grade on a paper. You thought you were elite because your online IQ test from 2010 told you so. All of that effort just to seem important. It's desperate. There is a name for your condition, though. Your inflated ego just didn't allow you to see it. Wannabe. You act like no one could ever understand your mind, but the truth is you're basic. You're a textbook case of insecurity disguised as control. Your patterns are predictable. Your motives are shallow. You are not profound. You're pathetic. You aren't special or deep, not mysterious or exceptional. Don't ever get it twisted again. No one is scared of you today. No one is intimidated by you. No one is impressed by you. No one thinks that you are important. You orchestrated this like you thought you were God. Now look at you, begging a courtroom for scraps. You spent months preparing, and still all it took was my sister in a sheath. You work so hard to seem dangerous, but real control doesn't have to prove itself. The truth is, the scariest part about you is how painfully average you turned out to be. The truth is, you're as dumb as they come. Stupid, clumsy, slow, sloppy, weak, dirty. Let me be very clear. Don't ever try to convince yourself you mattered just because someone finally said your name out loud. I see through you. You want the truth? Here's the one you'll hate the most. If you hadn't attacked them in their sleep, in the middle of the night, like a pedophile, Kaylee would have kicked your fucking ass. Thank you.
Thank you. During the quiet morning hours of November 13, 2022, a faceless coward breached the tranquility of 6 beautiful young people and senselessly slaughtered them, 4 of them. Who committed this unspeakable evil was unknown for several weeks, but due to the killer's incompetence and outstanding police work by numerous local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies, the person that slithered through that sliding glass door at 1122 King Road now stands before the world and this court unmasked. This unfathomable and senseless act of evil has caused immeasurable pain and loss. No parent should ever have to bury their child. This is the greatest tragedy that can be inflicted upon a person. Parents who took their children to college in a truck filled with moving boxes had to bring them home in hearses lined with coffins. The loss this killer inflicted was not just the death of these people's children, siblings, grandchildren, as we've heard today. It has ripped a hole in their soul, destroying a special part of their very essence. Any person who is a parent defines themselves foremost as such. It is their existence and purpose of being. And it has been stolen from these parents. None of us have experienced the loss these victims have in the unspeakable way that they have. And therefore, none of us can, nor should we, question the way in which they have handled their loss. Whether that be in private mourning, removed as far as possible from this media circus, or in front of a camera demanding retribution with the loudest megaphone. I've listened intently to the stories and pain that have been shared today, with great awe at the courage and resilience of the surviving family members of those wonderful children. I've listened also to the surviving roommates, both in person and through their friends. And I can't think of how, frankly, courageous they have been despite the hell that they have faced by uncaring people who have come up with all kinds of crazy theories about 2 kids simply being kids. The parents, siblings, and other family members who have spoken today are designated as victims in our legal system. But going forward, I hope that they can shed that label, as it gives too much power to the evil that condemned them to that role. They are and should be known as survivors fighters, and foremost as witnesses to the tremendous lives of value and unbounded promise of these 4 young people. But those speaking today and those who did not speak, but who carry this same burden, this same loss, now carry forward the memories of these now perpetually young people, these forever children. These survivors carry the responsibility of ensuring that the voices of these children, Maddie, Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan, are never forgotten, and the positive impacts that they have had on so many lives are never minimized, and that the love they shared, the light that they shined onto others, is forever celebrated. As we sit here today, this case is ending, and we are now certain who committed these unspeakable acts of evil, but we don't know, and what we may never know is why. I share the desire expressed by others to understand the why, but upon reflection, it seems to me, and this is just my own opinion, that by continuing to focus on why, we continue to give Mr. Kohberger relevance. We give him agency and we give him power. The need to know what is inherently not understandable makes us dependent upon the defendant to provide us with a reason, and that gives him the spotlight, the attention, and the power he appears to crave. Yet even if I could force him to speak, which legally I cannot, how could anyone ever be assured that what he speaks is the truth? Do we really believe, after all of this, he's capable of speaking the truth or of giving up something of himself to help the very people whose lives he destroyed? Rather, I suspect the so-called reason would be dished out in enticing, self-serving, and aggrandizing untruthful bits, leaving people wanting more information, more insight, and thus enhancing even further the power he seeks to hold. Even if we could get truthful insight into his why, I suspect it would not in any way quench one's thirst for actually understanding why in the first instance. Because there is no reason for these crimes that could approach anything resembling rationality. No conceivable reason could make any sense. And in the end, the more we struggle to seek explanation for the unexplainable, the more we try to extract a reason, the more power and control we give to him. In my view, the time has now come to end Mr. Kohberger's 15 minutes of fame. It's time that he be consigned to the ignominy and isolation of perpetual incarceration. I know there has been concern about him collaborating on books or movies or other media projects, and I truly hope that someone does not stoop to affording him this spotlight that he desires in the name of clicks, royalties, or profits. While criminal behavioralists should study him away from the spotlight in an attempt to prevent other would-be killers from acting on their worst impulses, there should be no need for that to spill over into the public eye. The great Idaho jurist Edward Lodge was known for trying to find something positive about every person he ever sentenced. And with over a half a century as a trial judge, that was a lot of people. This was often challenging, and I recall in one case he said that the best he could come up with was the defendant had good penmanship. Truth be told, I'm unable to come up with anything redeeming about Mr. Kohberger because his grotesque acts of evil have buried and hidden anything that might have been good or intrinsically human about him. His actions have made him the worst of the worst. Even in pleading guilty, he is giving nothing hinting of remorse or redemption, nothing suggesting even a recognition or understanding, let alone regret for the pain that he has caused. And therefore, I will not attempt to speak about him further, other than to simply sentence him so that he is forever removed from civilized society. And accordingly, based upon his conduct and based upon the record before this court, recognizing the standards that govern this court's sentencing decisions as set forth in State v. Toohill, I hereby sentence Mr. Kohberger as follows. On count 1, burglary, 10 years fixed, 0 years indeterminate. I also impose a fine of $50,000. Count 2, first-degree murder of Maddie Mogen. I sentence the defendant to a fixed term of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, a fine of $50,000, and a civil penalty of $5,000 payable to the family of the victim. On count 3, for first-degree murder of Kaylee Goncalves, I sentence the defendant to a fixed term of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, a fine of $50,000, and a civil penalty of $5,000 payable to the victim of the family, or to the family of the victim, pardon me. On count 4, for the first-degree murder of Xana Kernodle, I sentence the defendant to a fixed term of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, a fine of $50,000, and a civil penalty of $5,000 payable to the family of the victim. On count 5, for the first-degree murder of Ethan Chapin, I sentence the defendant to a fixed term of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, a fine of $50,000, and a civil penalty of $5,000 payable to the family of the victim. The sentences on counts 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 shall run consecutively to one another. Restitution will be left open for 60 days. Defendant will be required to submit a DNA sample and a right thumbprint impression to the Department of Corrections and comply with the DNA Database Act. I remand the defendant to the custody of the Idaho State Board of Corrections for to be imprisoned in an appropriate facility in execution of the sentence where he will remain until he dies. Though you have waived your right to appeal, you do have a right to file a notice of appeal, and any such appeal must be filed within 42 days of the date of the written judgment, which will be entered shortly hereafter. Though the appeal, you should be aware, may be deemed a violation of the plea agreement, and so I certainly suggest you discuss that with counsel if that is your desire. I ask the media and public present to allow the families to be escorted out first before they leave. Again, thank you to everyone for your stories today. I am strengthened by them, and I am encouraged by your humanity and strength, and God bless you. We're adjourned.
So, to clarify, for the murders of 21-year-old Kaylee Goncalves, 21-year-old Maddie Mogen, 20-year-old Xana Kernodle, and 20-year-old Ethan Chapin, 30-year-old Bryan Kohberger was sentenced to 4 consecutive terms of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, so he will die in prison. Due to him accepting a plea agreement, he has no right to appeal his conviction. Whilst justice was served, so many questions were left unanswered, including why did Kohberger commit this act of unspeakable evil? As there was no trial, he didn't testify, and evidence was not presented, which may have perhaps hinted at a motive in this case. However, in the next section, I'll present my theory on why 4 people lost their lives in such tragic circumstances, as well as looking at the evil that is Bryan Kohberger. In this section, I'm going to cover 2 things. Firstly, a profile of Bryan Kohberger in order to provide context, but then present my theory on why these murders occurred. So Bryan Kohberger is a bit of an enigma, someone who had apparently never come to police attention, who, out of nowhere, killed 4 people. But as you guys who watch the channel know, this is not accurate. People don't just become killers, and especially not on this scale, this level of savagery. This was the end of the journey, not the start. Kohberger was, at one point, an extremely unhappy child due to his issues. He had a rare neurological condition and was overweight, and this led to him being bullied and isolated. I think this led to him disconnecting entirely from society. People didn't like him, and he didn't care about people. In fact, he despised them. He had no empathy or compassion for them. As a way to manage, I think he created a narcissistic shell around himself, convinced himself that he was actually better than everyone else. He would one day get his revenge. One day, people would see how great he was. When Kohberger lost weight, he gained more confidence, but I think that nothing really changed. He was still an outcast. Could people not see how amazing he was? So he began to demonstrate his greatness talking down to people, dominating lectures, wanted to be the centre of attention. But he clearly had a hatred of women. Where this came from is not clear, but I imagine, due to his poor social skills, he was likely rejected by women, and now he was going to punish them. He spoke down to them, gave them lower grades than their male counterparts. This was him wielding his little bit of power. Bryan Kohberger, like others I've covered on this channel, was drawn to studying criminology, but this was simply so he could indulge his fascination and admiration for those who abuse and harm others, things he wanted to do to people. It was also a way for him to learn how not to get caught. I don't think it's coincidence that Kohberger was looking for pornography revolving around rape and idolising serial killers such as Ted Bundy. He admired those who wielded ultimate control over women. It aroused him. It was only 5 months between Bryan Kohberger moving to Idaho and him committing the murders, and I believe that by this point he'd already begun having violent fantasies about killing women for some time. He bought the balaclava and K-bar knife months before arriving in Idaho. I think he likely had another target in mind before he moved, someone who rejected him, someone who he was going to punish for this act of disrespect. Kohberger showed flashes of the monster that he was, but he was a wolf in sheep's clothing, and no one saw how dangerous he was until it was too late. Now we move on to the murders themselves. Why these 4 people? Why here? One theory I've read, presented by a former FBI agent, suggests that Kohberger broke into the house in Moscow to target one particular person, specifically Maddie Mogen, with him intending to rape her. And then, when he found Kaylee in the room with her, he became enraged that he couldn't carry out his sexual attack. And so, in anger, he not only killed Kaylee, but also hacked her face until she was unrecognisable as an act of punishment for getting in the way of his plans. I don't agree with this. I think the underlying theory is right, that Kohberger went to the house with the intention of attacking one person, but I don't agree with the other details. Specifically, whilst we do not know Kohberger's exact movements in the house, it appears that Maddie was killed while she slept, and Kaylee was killed when she woke up. This would suggest to me that Maddie was killed first, and then Kaylee was attacked. This doesn't fit the narrative that he was there to rape Maddie, given that he likely killed her first. However, I'm unclear why Kaylee being in the room would have stopped Kohberger from raping Maddie, if that was his intention. He could have killed Kaylee and then carried on with his plan. Also, if he'd been watching the house, which he most certainly was, he would have seen that Kaylee was moving out. It would have made far more sense if he was going to attack Maddie to wait until her friend had left, making it less likely he would be disturbed or stopped. But let's wind back. Detectives searched high and low for a link between Kohberger and any of the people in the house and found none, and this was them clearly looking for mutual friends, etc., but I think this will never be found. I think this is because Kohberger was not known to any of them, but was obsessed with one of them, Kaylee Goncalves. I think she was the target, and the attack was motivated by rage and him wanting to punish her for rejecting him. I think I'm correct, because as I stated earlier in the video, it was Kaylee who reported that she had a stalker and that she'd received a strange message on Facebook Messenger. I think the person who sent this message, but was also stalking her, was Bryan Kohberger. But how did this start? I think there could be a number of possibilities, but for example, one could be that he saw her in a club and approached her, and as they were both students, they swapped names and chatted about what they were studying and where, etc. A simple interaction which Kaylee likely thought of as small talk, done with and forgotten. But this was Kohberger gathering information, fueling his obsession with the woman he was sexually attracted to, who he wanted, and this would happen because he desired it. Unfortunately, I think that social media plays a large part in what happened next. I'm not a fan of social media, and never have been, probably because I think the dangers outweigh any benefits for myself. It's quite easy to gather information on someone online, and people often don't realise it. Take, for example, a picture of your front door with a post saying new home, and now have your house number. Take a video of your toddler riding their trike down the road and accidentally filming the street sign, and now have the name of the road. You've put where your current city is, so now I have everything I need to find you. Bryan Kohberger is undoubtedly a monster, but he's also clever. Kaylee was very active on social media, so I imagine he spent hours going through her posts, learning her routine, learning about her life. It may have been this way that he discovered where Kaylee lived, or potentially he followed her. It's known that he travelled to the area in and around 1122 King Road on at least 12 occasions in the months before the murders. I think this was to watch his target. I said earlier that the area around the house is important to this case. This is because to the east of the house is a road which is elevated above the property, so anyone standing on it can look down on the house. I found this video of a woman who went to the property before it was demolished, who stood on the road and was pointing out the bedrooms, highlighting where the attacks occurred. Whilst watching this, it suddenly struck me that this is likely exactly where the man that Kaylee reported seeing when she took out her dog about a month before the murders was standing. From here, it's clear that he would have had an unobstructed view of both the third floor bedrooms, the bedrooms of Maddie and Kaylee. I think that on those 12 occasions, Kohberger stood at this spot, watching Kaylee, learning her routine, reinforcing his obsession. He wanted her and she would comply. So what tipped him over the edge? I think this was fundamentally because he felt that Kaylee rejected him, but this may have not been in the way you think. Potentially this was a direct rejection, i.e. someone turning someone down for a date, etc., and this could have been the content of the strange Facebook message that Kaylee received. However, it's important to point out there are some stalkers who are so delusional they'll convince themselves they're in a relationship with their target even though their victim has no idea who they are. This is most common with high-profile celebrity stalkers and can end with fatal consequences. For example, in June 2016, a man called Kevin James Lobel gunned down rising pop star Christina Grimmie after she performed at Plaza Live in Orlando. At a meet and greet after the show, he lined up with fans to meet Christina, and when he got to the front of the line, he pulled out a gun and shot her 3 times, twice in the chest and once in the head. He then turned the gun on himself. It turned out that Lobel was obsessed with Christina, talking about her all the time and referring to her as his soulmate. It's believed that he decided to kill her because she posted pictures of herself online with a man called Steven Reza. In his disturbed mind, she was essentially cheating on him, so if he couldn't have her, no one else could. There was never any evidence found that Christina ever met Lobel or ever spoke to him. She was murdered by a man that she didn't even know existed. Reflecting this onto the current situation, I think that Kaylee could have posted a picture of her with the man, and Kohberger saw this as the ultimate betrayal. She was cheating on him. Maybe the fact she was moving away was the breaking point. If she went, what was he meant to do? Who was he meant to follow and watch? Again, this would have felt like a rejection. In his mind, it was like a girlfriend moving away. As to why he decided to strike when he did, it appears that Kaylee had indeed moved out to the property, but it seems she visited often and was, from what I've read, still packing up her stuff before her trip to Europe. If Kohberger had seen this, he would have realised his window of opportunity was closing. He had to strike now. I just need to say here that I have no doubt this was not the first time that Bryan Kohberger has stalked a woman and potentially thought about killing one who he felt rejected by. As I said earlier in this section, he'd bought the balaclava and knife months before he moved to Idaho. I think this was what he was going to use during an attack on a woman he fixated on in Pennsylvania. However, this time it was different. He was going to follow through with his plan. He was going to live out his fantasies of having ultimate control over a woman, deciding when their life came to an end. It's clear that Kohberger knew the layout of the property. This was all part of his preparation. I think this is because he'd been in the house before. I believe that Kohberger had, when everyone else was out, walked around the property, trying ways to get in. He potentially tried the front door, hence the damage found to it, but gave up. He then circled the house and found the sliding doors, which it appears were almost always unlocked. He entered and walked through the house, learning the layout, so that when he was ready to strike, he could go directly to his target, commit the murder, and then leave as quickly as possible to avoid detection. My theory appears to have weight, as recently an article has been published about a neighbour telling police that she almost certainly saw Bryan Kohberger walking around the house sometime in September 2022. I also believe that he knew who was in the house and where they were on Saturday the 12th of November 2022, because one or more of them likely posted what they were doing on social media. Was he tracking their movements? Was he watching the live stream as Kaylee and Maddie ordered their food before killing them just a few hours later? Potentially, we'll never know, but I've no doubt he knew Kaylee would be in the house. And so, in the early hours of the next morning, he enacted his plan and broke in. I think part of the reason why there's this theory that he was there to target Maddie is because it appears he went to her bedroom first. However, I've read that Murphy, Kaylee's dog, started barking, with the implication being that he actually went into Kaylee's room first, and when he found it empty, he went to Maddie's room. Regardless, I still think that Kaylee was the target. When he was in the room, he quickly killed Maddie and then turned his attention to Kaylee, subjecting her to a horrific and frenzied attack. He not only stabbed her, but appears to have strangled her and beaten her with a blunt object. He was furious with her and took out all of his anger on her. He then hacked at Kaylee's face, making her unrecognizable, destroying her beauty, making her ugly. His punishment for her rejecting him. He then went to leave the property. However, Xana Kernodle saw him, and he saw her. She was a potential witness, so after a brave struggle, she was stabbed to death in her bedroom. Kohberger then spotted Ethan Chapin on the bed. He was another witness, so he had to die. Then he continued and left the house, and luckily he didn't see Dylan Mortenson opening her door and watching him. If he had, I have no doubt he would have killed her too. If this had been a frenzy, a man who wanted to kill as many people as possible, he would have gone room to room looking for targets, but he didn't. He went straight to the 3rd floor and then went to leave. Him killing Xana and Ethan, I believe, was unfortunately simply because he saw them as potential witnesses. They were not who he was there to kill, but if they had to die so he could get away with his crimes, so be it. He then proudly took a selfie, a memento of his first kills. Had he gotten away with these murders, he would have done this again and again and again. But luckily, Bryan Kohberger was caught and is now behind bars, and he will never be released. May he rot. So, what's your thoughts on this case? This is a case where there are no firm answers. Only one person knows why he committed these murders, and I doubt Bryan Kohberger will ever tell anyone. This is him holding on to his last bit of power. I've presented my theory and would love to hear yours. So if you like the content, then consider becoming a channel member by clicking the join button. You can also send a one-off donation to support the channel via the thanks button. I'm working really hard to get the channel to 100,000 subs, so please like, share, and most importantly subscribe. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.